Matthew chapter 25 begins with a story about 10 women, 10 virgins. Women that have never given themselves. If we look at it spiritually, to say, never having given themselves to foreign gods, to anyone, to any bridegroom of any nature. Well, we know that they all looked exactly the same. They had all come together. They were dressed in wedding clothes. They had lamps that were lit. And they went out. They went out to wait for the bridegroom. And the wait was longer than they thought. And they all fell asleep. To this point, there's no distinction between any of them. They're all the same. And then the bridegroom comes. There's a shout, and they wake up. And 5 of them realize their lamps had gone out, and they have no extra oil. The other 5, they had brought extra oil with them. Well, the 5 with the dark lamps said, please give us some of your oil that we might be ready. And they said, we can't. Because if we give to you, we won't have enough. And they said, go somewhere and try to get some oil. Well, as it turned out, they weren't able to get any oil. And if we just look at this story now from the overview of the point of the detail, when the bridegroom came, there was a point at which they needed the oil and they couldn't get it. The result of which was they came to the door of the wedding feast where the others had gone in already. And were told by the master, I don't know you. I don't know you. Well, when we think of this spiritually, we imagine, what does it mean that the Lord is saying to them, I don't know you. He knows everything. So what is he actually saying here? Well, I'd like to connect that story with the one that appears in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 to 23, where a number of people come to the Lord and they're declaring to him of all of the things that they've done in his name. They've preached the gospel, they've healed the sick, and all the things that believers are supposed to do. And he says to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, workers of iniquity. I never knew you. You say, how can that be? How could it be that they knew him, they had declared his name, they had done his works, and he said to them, I don't know you? It's very similar. Pretty identical. So what is this knowing about? What is he talking about? In Hebrew, we know that this word, to know, is indicative, and it's used for the marital intimacy between a husband and a wife. It says Adam knew his wife, and she brought forth a child. So when the Lord says, I don't know you, he's essentially saying, you did not open up your heart fully to me. You didn't let me in. You held something back. I think about this as it's the ultimate tragedy. They didn't know they weren't ready until it was too late. So comes a question. Where does the oil come from? How do we get this oil? How can we know? How can we be sure that in our moment we will not find ourselves as the 5 foolish virgins? We know from the actual meaning of the word for foolish in the Greek that they were heedless, among other things. Meaning, there was something they were warned about. They were told. They were instructed, but they didn't listen. They were called, but they didn't respond. In some way, the oil we take to be representative of the Spirit of God. And it's a picture of intimacy as well. To understand something of this intimate dynamic, we'd look at Psalm 91, which in days of great trouble becomes a very turned to passage that we lean on and take the promises of it. How 1,000 will fall at our right hand and 10,000 at our left hand, and it won't come near us. And all of the plagues and all of the things that come on the world won't come near us. And we claim that, but we had better pay attention to the conditions set forth in verse number 1. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. He who dwells in the secret place. This is where the oil comes from. It comes from abiding with God, not to get something, not out of a place of need, but just dwelling with Him. In verse 9 of the chapter it says, because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place, no evil shall befall you. And then, it's as though the Lord was saying in verse 14, because He has set His love upon me. God, hear this from God now. Because God is saying, because you have set your love on me, therefore I will deliver you. That's the promise. To dwell in the secret place. This was the hidden difference between the 5 wise and the 5 foolish. The 5 wise had a foundation of relationship with the Lord. They had more than a functional interaction of God providing for their needs. I think of something from Israel's history. We find it in Exodus chapter 20. It's verses 18 to 21. When the voice of God was thundering from the mountain, and the people said to Moses, "Please, let him not speak to us anymore. If he continues to speak to us, we'll die." And Moses said, "Don't you know that he's come to you to deliver you, to bless you? That the fear of him would keep you from sinning?" They didn't know him. They didn't know his nature. And they said, "We don't want to hear your voice." You can mark this, if you would, as the beginning of Israel's trouble. They closed the door to the intimacy. Let us not find ourselves in that day without the oil. But let us understand that now, in our life now, when we're not in the midst of everything falling apart around us, now is the time to gather together and to set apart and to be with him and to abide with him and to dwell in the secret place. And the result of that will be all the rest that's in this wonderful psalm of promises. And we will find ourselves seated at the table of the marriage supper. Blessed be the Lord.